Hello and welcome to Lighten Up TV. I am your host, Suzanne Ross, and it's such a privilege to be here today with Brad Olsen. Welcome, Brad.
Hi, Suzanne. Thanks for having me on.
And for over 20 years, Brad has been an author, a publisher, as well as an event producer. And you've written several books, a lot of them focused on esoteric teachings.
That's right, including one that I'm going to give you today, including Future Esoteric, and this is the book that's gotten me on ancient aliens, and I'll be on Coast to Coast a week from tonight, and many other media outlets talking about some of these most difficult questions that people have, but I find to be some of the most important subjects that we could possibly try to learn about.
Yes, and it sounds like your esoteric series has turned into a trilogy.
It has, and the try in the trilogy won't be available until 2018, but we have Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses, which is the first book in the series, and it basically chronicles all the mystery schools and learnings, antediluvian civilizations from long ago up to this modern day. And then Future Esoteric takes it from there and looks into the future and tackles the ET enigma, but also leaves off on a very positive note with a section called Utopia and things that we can learn from all this and take with us and create a much better society and world.
I like that. And then you have Beyond Esoteric coming out in 2018.
Right, the ultimate journey. And I never repeat any information, so now I've closed a lot of bookends that remained open, as well as some things that have been withheld from humanity, such as giants in our ancient history, which is one of the workshops I'll be doing here at Awareness Life Expo, with a lot of information and evidence that us puny little humans once lived among very large giants who were not human because sometimes they had an extra digit on their finger or another row of teeth, plus they were many, many feet taller than we are. And there's skeleton evidence, there's Egyptian hieroglyphic evidence, and here in North America, quite a few of the mound sites of the Midwest. And I did a book called Sacred Places North America when I first started getting introduced to this subject, finding that a lot of these mounds that were excavated in the 19th century contain these giants. But because this model of other humans living on this planet, perhaps a long time ago, but perhaps intermingling with humans, was not part of that cookie-cutter formula of history, that much of this has been erased. And there is what we call Smithsonian Gate, that the Smithsonian Institute would come down and say, okay, we're going to take over this dig, Dr. So-and-so, you're relieved of duty, and that's the last of it. Nobody would hear from it ever again. But fortunately, there are literally hundreds of newspaper accounts of some of these digs at some of these mound sites, which do give us a glimpse of what was really in there. And it's quite fascinating.
So who do you think these giants were, and where are they from?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of times legends imitate real-life art, and I think we can look to the Bible and other ancient documents, the Sumerian cuneiform of Zechariah Sitchin. I would have to say that there probably were the Nephilim and other giants such as the Anunnaki, other races that came here, other progenitor species that may have even been part of the tinkering of our genetics that made us who we are. We cannot overlook the fact that today, now in our modern age, we're doing everything that was said in some of these ancient texts that they were doing, such as genetic engineering. Nowadays, we talk about GMOs and even cloning animals and people. And this is very high technology, and there are extremely important consequences for doing that. And so in my workshop, I want to get into that a little bit in the end, because this is who we are, and these are subjects that I think people have a right to know about and should know about.
Yes, and it does pose the question then, you know, why would these advanced beings with the capability to impact our DNA codes, you know, why would they be doing this? Would they be doing it to upgrade us from like a primitive being to a more intelligent, advanced being, or they just want to be part of a lineage that, you know, unfolds here on planet Earth?
Right. Well, the
Or
narrative.
Yes and yes.
Yeah, yes and yes and yes. Let's go through that checklist one by one. And many of the ancient texts, as well as a lot of the archaeological evidence, points to the fact that we were created to be workers, basically, who wouldn't question too much. But it was a mixture of some indigenous DNA through the Homo erectus and Neanderthal indigenous species that had evolved up here on this planet quite organically, combining with perhaps some very advanced human-like species. And Edgar Cayce goes in to talk about the survivors of Atlantis, and after the fall that they were pretty much stranded here and thrust back down into this third dimensional reality and lost all their high-tech toys. And they had to be humans again, very much in survival mode. And that some of those remaining survivors of Atlantis were actually 12-strand DNA humans. So they innately had what we would consider superhuman abilities, which we're now just rediscovering. And these are chapters in Future Esoteric that I take on and want people to understand that we have some of these innate abilities that can come back to us with a little bit of training and encouragement and the positive thought that we can learn these things over again. So the way the narrative goes is we were created with some indigenous DNA and maybe even some very advanced DNA, but they didn't want us to be 12-strain, so they struck it out of the mating females. And only 2-strand humans, which is what we are born. But something very interesting is happening. The very first 3rd-strand DNA child was born in the UK about 10 years ago. So it's happening. And if you look at people's DNAs now, it's showing little nodules that we're about ready to explode into these multi-strand DNA species. Can't say if that's going to happen in our lifetimes or even to us, but it could happen in future generations. That is, if the transhuman agenda doesn't take over and completely change who we are. And that's a subject that I'm going to cover in Beyond Esoteric, the 3rd book.
So do you think that our DNA codes can be impacted by this cosmological shift of our planet into direct alignment with the great central sun and the center of the galaxy?
Yes, I do. And that's really what it's all about. And people who become in tune to this energy and this awareness will be the first, perhaps, to make this great leap forward.
And so is there something that we can do as human beings to raise our frequency, to activate that dormant DNA?
I think being the very best human being you can possibly be, to give up the negative emotions, to embrace positive emotions in your daily life, to be one who is in service to others. And in many ways, this is why I continue to be the producer of the How Weird Street Fair, because I have to work my butt off that day. But I get to put the smile on the face of 25,000 people. So that is my way of being in service to others. So I think when you really prove with your actions and lead with that stance, and you're not looking for any external rewards other than knowing that this is the right thing to do with the best emotional state you can put yourself at, you're bound to succeed. And you're bound to be on the forefront of those who do make the ascension, the first leading edge, shall we say.
That sounds so empowering. Yeah, so can you expand on the transhumans that may try to interfere with this?
Okay, well, it's a complicated subject, and it's multifaceted, and there are good sides to it and bad sides to it. I'm very worried about the bad sides, because the bad side could be technology converting the human race into humanity 2.0, for better or for worse. The way it's being rolled out now with gentlemen like Ray Kurzweil, who's also in the Bay Area and has an office with Google and works on some of these projects, he is an advocate for many things like biochipping us and enhancing our brain. And some of the things are pretty commonsensical, such as just eating well and a good pure diet, and things that really will give you more energy in your life and help you in many ways. But the long-term projection is what Kurzweil and others call the singularity moment, which is very much upon us and will happen in the next decade or sooner. And that is when artificial intelligence, reaches this threshold that they're then smarter than human beings. And this is a very dangerous precedence to cross, because if we let AI into our world, if we let it control us in any kind of way, then it could be us versus the robots in some future nightmarish dystopian future. It's one of those things that is happening now, and unless we call the checks and balances on it, for example, these unmanned drone strikes, these are actually robots that can kill humans. I don't know if you remember back with some of the great science fiction authors in the 60s and 70s, Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov, set the protocol for how robots would interact with humans. And the number one law is thou shalt never harm a human. We've already crossed that threshold. We already have robots that can kill humans. So where is this going? Where are we going to allow this to go? And my fear is, after the singularity moment, that the AI will become somewhat sentient in a way, and will be like robots that don't want to get turned off, that they will sense their own being and perhaps assert their own rights to existence. And then we have a very big problem on our hands.
Do you think there's AI beings that walk amongst us now that look like humans?
That walk among us now? You mean sort of like Blade Runner type replicants?
I actually saw this on Ancient Aliens. Yes, where they were exploring the concept that there could be beings walking amongst us now that look just like us, but they're actually robotic beings. They're AI.
I mean, the other way to phrase that is actually alien types as well that look just like us. And I would say,
sent here by aliens.
Let's just say the possibility for both of those happening is very high, meaning it's a very good chance that they are. Now, whether they're coming from our own laboratories and our own technology, which oftentimes is backward engineered and borrowed from the visitors, would be a question of, is it ours or theirs? Now then you get into the whole concept of free will and the respect that other entities have to maintain for those who assert their free will. For example, if you really do not want to get abducted, you can just kick in hissy fit and say, no way, you're not taking me, I don't allow it, you can't touch me. And really they can't, and they have to let you go. But a lot of people, even in a hypnotic state, will be like, oh wow, a UFO, and I get a chance to check it out, maybe I'll go along with this. Next thing you know, you're on a laboratory table and being probed and all sorts of other things because you allowed it to happen. And this is what happens with things like Lori's work, that you have to allow yourself to be in a position to be able to be hypnotized.
So remember, the prime directive is not to violate our free will, and it's galactic law.
It is galactic law.
Yes. And so we have more power over this alien abduction, and with our mind control and our own empowerment.
Right. And it goes a step further. It goes to the point where we really actually have to understand that we have this free will to assert. Because if we don't, we give it up.
Yeah.
And if you give it up, you're saying, okay, you got free reign. And in a way, that is losing your free will. So I think in all this, we really need to be very positive about it, because it can get you down. It can get you into a very depressed state if you allow it. The fact that there would be some of these entities perhaps prying upon us. And in that event, remember that you're a sovereign being, and remember that you have a right to say no, and you always can. Okay? But the bigger step, the humanity step, is we all have to realize our role. And our role are the masters of this human surface part of the planet. There is an underworld, and they have their rules, and there's an above us, and they have their rules. But our rules right now are somewhat shattered. And we've been manipulated so hard for so long that humanity has not had the chance to come together and assert itself. And once we do that, then I think we are ushering in the golden age, and then we will see incredible changes on this planet, a world of abundance, as well as releasing free energy. That's kind of on the front end of all this. But in my book, Future Esoteric, I have a section called Utopia, where I examine many of the things that could and should happen to allow humanity to get to that point.
Mm-hmm. So what about the concept that we've been seeded by many of these different races, and we're actually part human, part alien already?
Yeah, it's true. We have dozens of different ET types already in us. We're built this way. I grew up with parents who were atheists and say, we're not going to teach you any religion. I came into it completely with a blank slate, and I've been quite skeptical to many of these subjects for a long time. I've come to realize that you have to look deeper into these things, and I had my own experience in 1997 that really shook me up and made me think that there's a lot more to this than we're being shown. And that's a course I've been on for 20 years now, is to really delve into these subjects and try to understand what exactly all the agendas are all about. And there are many. And we can't really get hung up on how scaly the skins are, or how their eyes look, how big they are, how little or how big they are. What's only important is to remember that there are service to self and service to other ETs. And the ones who are service to others not only are the way we want to be personally, to give as much as we can to each other and for our own benefit, really. I mean, it's what it all comes down to. But that the service to self ETs have their own agenda, and we're in that agenda. And so once we understand that and really start to expose it, it's game over, and they have to leave. Because we are the masters of the surface here. We own this domain, even though we don't know it, and even though we don't assert ourselves. Once we do, the earth can go through some really great changes.
I like the feeling of being proud to be human and being very empowered by the fact that this is our world, regardless of how many different DNA codes we may have. We are here as humans, here and now, to take accountability and responsibility for our world and to move into this utopia. So let's move into the more benevolent service to other beings that are supporting our ascension.
Yes, that's right. And you mentioned the Prime Directive, which was popularized on the TV show Star Trek, which is the term they use, but is a real universal law. And that's why so many people have said, how come these UFOs just don't land on the White House lawn and announce themselves, and we're here to benefit all mankind? Well, the truth is they can't. And they don't, even if they could, they don't want to. But the reason they can't is because of the laws of free will. This is our karma on this planet that we've created, for better or for worse. And it's really up to the humans to resolve it. They are so advanced, and we have so much to learn from them, but they're also afraid of us because we still have wars, we still have poverty, we still kill each other, we still kill ourselves, and they can't really understand that, how we could have such a low value of life. So therefore, they need us to work it out. Now, but they will be here to help us, and if you ask for help, you might be able to dream solutions. There are channelers, there are people who have been able to intercede some of this information, and they would like those people to be the emissaries for the rest of us, to try to help disseminate that information. But of course that's a very small amount compared to the huge amount of humanity that's here that is still very much stuck in the matrix and really can't get out.
Hello and welcome to Lighten Up. I'm so excited to be here today with Brad Olsen. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you, Suzanne. It's good to be here.
Brad has written so many remarkable books, and these are only two examples. He's written many books about sacred places around the world, and they're really phenomenal. He features not only the spiritual belief systems around all of these places that he's going, but also searches for the deeper meaning and purpose behind these temple sites. Then Brad started writing the Esoteric series, starting with modern esoteric, and now future esoteric, and your third esoteric book is coming out soon.
It's called Beyond Esoteric, The Ultimate Journey, and I never repeat my material, so I'm finding new material that no 19th century esotericist could have ever imagined the human race would be confronted with. So it's even a continuation upon future esoteric into some realms that are very unique to this age we live in.
I really look forward to that. It sounds so fascinating. I love exploring other realms, especially at this most auspicious time on the planet.
Very auspicious. And the nature of the word esoteric means it's information that's usually sought out or contained by a select few people. So you really have to want to know these subjects. And it's kind of along the line of what the word occult means, which just means hidden. And a lot of these subjects are hidden in plain sight, and you really have to seek them out because we're not getting this information via the mass media, the government, or our educational system. So there is a layer above and beyond what we're being told, and these are the subjects that I find so fascinating.
It's interesting, when I opened your book, Sacred Places, one of the first chapters that I came upon, you were talking about the Great Wall of China and dragons, and how we've been led to believe that dragons and serpents are scary and evil, and in effect, it's really been intentional so that we don't awaken the truth within us, that they really are sacred, and that the Great Wall of China was actually a long stone serpent.
Right. And the Chinese always believe that they live on the spine of the serpent, and the Great Wall is just an emanation of the tail and the spine of the serpent, cutting through what they've always called themselves the Middle Kingdom, because they've always known that there's kingdoms all around, but they've always thought of themselves right there in the middle.
Interesting. And so you were telling me earlier that writing the books about the sacred places really led to your esoteric series. Can you tell me how that transition took place?
Sure. So I basically started as a travel writer, as a journalist, and I've been on dozens of press trips and spent years, literally years overseas, living abroad and traveling abroad, and finding myself magnetically attracted to these places. Every time I take a trip, I always try to find a new one and check it out, talk to the locals, get the background information, as you said, the traditional aspects of these sites, and try to combine them all, as well as sometimes the paranormal aspects. And a lot of these sacred places also have UFO sightings frequently around them, sometimes even Bigfoot or cryptozoology type creatures that are associated with these sites. So it occurred to me that there's just so much more information that I could put into one book on 108 sites, that I could only give treatment to about 3 or 4 pages, where a place like the Great Pyramid could easily be a whole chapter or a whole book. So those esoteric traditions that were related to some of these sites then went into modern esoteric. And that's basically the story from the beginning, including the mystery schools of old and the secret societies more in this modern age, up to the present time. And then future esoteric takes a forward-looking stance, and that's when I get into the secret state to understand how all this has been bottled up, and then the cosmos section about all things ET. Finishing up with the utopia section, which are solutions for humanity and ways that we can use what we know up till now to go into the future and make this world a better place.
Egypt being really the original golden age of enlightenment, the mystery school teachings from those times seem really applicable now.
Yeah. A lot of times this information never goes out of style. It's just we're not being prompted by
the basically institutions in this country and around the world to learn about these things. For example, I have a chapter in the Utopia section of Future Esoteric about superhuman abilities. Wouldn't it be great if when we went to primary school we were learning how to become telepathic or clairvoyant or become astral travelers? We weren't, and that's why these subjects have been bottled up in the realm of the esoteric for so long. But they don't go away, and of course we still have these innate abilities to learn and utilize them if only we were properly trained to do so.
We were both just at a conference last weekend, and Mary Rodwell was presenting about how schools just like that are now being formed. And with only a few weeks under their belt, these kids were reading with their blindfolds on. They were clearly seeing what was in front of them, pictures, text, one of the abilities that they had developed in only weeks' time.
That's amazing, and that's the way it should be. And can you imagine how far these children can go into their adult lives building upon these skills that I claim are innate within all of us if we just learn how to bring them out?
Yes, I saw a chapter in Future Esoteric called Superhuman Capabilities.
Yeah.
Going back to modern esoteric, I'm just so fascinated about how Egypt, in their golden age, how we can learn from them to enter our own new golden age. So can you tell me from modern esoteric what you share about that?
Well, first of all, that it's on very key ley line points in the continent. It's such a important juncture that whoever knew where to build the Great Pyramids knew that the Earth was spherical, knew that there were several continents, and indeed the exact location, latitude and longitude, is the dead center of all the land masses on this planet. So it's coming into just the building process already having a very universal understanding about this location. It's also been proven that underneath the Great Pyramid is a labyrinth of chambers and passageways and levels containing many artifacts that have to be suppressed according to the Egyptian authorities, because what they would reveal is our ET heritage and a long line of very high-tech instruments, including the Akashic records, which could then access us to everything in our past. And then there would be no conspiracy theories anymore. We would know exactly what happened in all these cases. And there's also supposed to be a giant UFO in one chamber. And there was actually an Egyptologist who let it slip one time at a press conference and said that there was this craft down there and they have no idea how they got it in there, but it's down there. So there's so many things. I mean, we could do the whole talk today about the Great Pyramids and how it came from Atlantean technology and the culture that began in Egypt after the fall of Atlantis was the Osirian Empire, and much of the technology came with the priests from the sunken continent to the fertile valley of the Nile. And because of its very important ley lines, this particular site around Cairo was chosen as the capital.
And not just the ley lines, I understand from Robert Bobal's work that the three pyramids of Giza were also directly aligned with the three belt stars of Orion,
right,
10,500 years ago.
Right. And because of the precession of the equinoxes, it's quite a little bit off kilter, just in the same way that the Sphinx, which is this big lion creature with a human head, is facing towards the Leo constellation. But because of the precession of the equinox, it's off a few degrees. He doesn't quite look at that constellation anymore. And that's how we're able to date these monuments into the tens of thousands of years old, not a few thousand years old, as Egyptologists would tell you.
Yes, absolutely. From Drunvalo Melchizedek's work, I found it so fascinating. Of course, he goes into the fall of Atlantis and then the buildup of Egypt in the land of Chem, and how at that time the pyramids were activated. Also, he talks about this spaceship that landed on top of the Great Pyramid, and they were taking these Nikal Mystery School initiates to 3 different sites on the planet, and one being the Mayan, and one being Egyptian, and one being in the Himalayas. And when they got back to Egypt, and this was going to be, you know, the progenitors of a new golden age here in Egypt, that spaceship went underground, under the pyramid.
Got it down there. Ah, okay.
So just, you know, affirming what you were saying from some of Melchizedek's work around that. And then this, our Golden Age Oracle, Megan Martinez, on our last radio show was talking about how our planet may have been intentionally moved to be back in this direct alignment with the 3 belt stars of Orion, so that those 3 pyramids will once again align directly with the 3 belt stars of Orion.
And if I could just expand on Orion, of course, we know that the Orion constellation is also associated with the reptilians, that this is one of their strongholds in the universe. So there's a light side and a dark side. Sometimes they're even called the Orion Empire, that has spread out across our solar system. But the reptilians aren't even from our universe. They're from another universe. And they come here as a conquering race. And they have been here for, my understanding, 7,700 years. So they weren't there during the time of the building of the Great Pyramids and the blossoming of the Osirian Empire. But there was a certain period where we were very vulnerable, and they found an opportunity to get in here, and now they have affected our consciousness and our awareness. But it seems to be that it's kind of this love-hate relationship with Orion, that one, we know that this is the center point where they're operating out of, but 2, maybe a source in an older age where perhaps some human-like entities once resided and came from as well. And perhaps those were the plans of the original building. And like I said, the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx should be dated more in the tens of thousands of years old.
Yes.
And therefore, at that time, there was not the reptilian influence that there was. And perhaps they were a little optimistic that maybe we could get Orion back. I don't think that's been the case, that this is still quite a stronghold for this group as they stretch out in our universe to conquer planets that are vulnerable. And Earth has been vulnerable. And keep in mind that the reptilians and the Greys, these malevolent service to self ETs, have 4th dimensional abilities. So they have an incredible advantage over us. We really can't compete. It's almost like a mom and pop store trying to stay afloat when the new Walmart opens down the street, who has prices half of theirs, and they can't get their supply that cheap. It's in the same vein that we can't compete with entities of a 4th dimensional nature. One, because we haven't been taught that. We haven't been trained to become multidimensional, and we have that ability if only we were to learn it. And if we were to learn it, we may even have the possibility with the Ascension to just jump the 4th dimension and go right to the 5th. And then this is why there is such a battle going on, invisible battle, silent wars with quiet weapons, to keep the human race suppressed and keep us here locked in this hard 3rd dimensional reality. Because if we were to jump over the 4th and into the 5th, then we would have an advantage over them. And they can't have it because, of course, they would lose this whole solar system, not only Earth, but everything around us. And this is like a gateway point on the outer ring of the Milky Way galaxy to jump to other galaxies within the greater universe.
That explains so much. So many of us talk about moving into 5D.
Yeah.
As if this 4D isn't even necessary. It's just a brief transition, you know, from 3D straight into 5D. So. And
I always thought we should try to go into 4D, but what I understand through esoteric studies, that this is the realm of all the spirits, and some of them are quite malevolent. That's what you get with like exorcisms and demonic possessions. Those are all the entities that exist in the 4th. So maybe our best interest to just skip that and go right into the 5th, and then we enter into a density where the primary motivation and emotion is love. And if you can enhance that in yourself, if you can really embody it, you're in a very good position to make that jump. If you're still fighting your fights and living in an anger state or a state of fear, you may get left behind. So it's a very important point to try to embrace your heart chakra, open yourself up, become in service to others, become compassionate for others, even total strangers. We're all in this together. And all we have to do is empower the human race to just ask for our abilities to rule this surface world and empower ourselves and bring ourselves together. And so everything that's happening is always to keep us divided, keep us at war, keep us thinking we're separate. We're not. We're all one. And as soon as we know that, we become empowered. And then I think we can make that great leap, which has been our destiny for so long.